everyone to this webinar, Increasing Your Productivity from the Inside Out. And I'm Melanie Green. I'm just going to say a little bit about myself because there are some people on the webinar who haven't met me before. So I'm an occupational psychologist and I run my own business and have been doing that for many years now. And I work as a coach and trainer, and I specialize in two main areas. One is around communication issues in the workplace. That might be in terms of individuals not getting on or teams wanting to work more effectively together. Sometimes it's about managers, how they manage their staff and get the best out of the staff, have those difficult conversations. And the other area is around resilience and how we cope with the pressures of life in order to avoid stress, and very much working from the inside out. And I work in all different industries and organizations, from engineering, manufacturing, food manufacturing, pharmaceutical research, to opera companies, to schools, etc., because it's about people rather than what they actually do. So we're looking at increasing your productivity from the inside out. And we're going to start off looking at the difference between pressure and stress, and look at a model around the zone of optimal performance, and then look at how your brain operates and how it responds to pressure and can affect our productivity, and then kind of look at your kind of next steps. How do you put this all into practice? And so let's kind of move on to the kind of content. Is that in terms of increasing productivity, we are looking from the inside out. So there's lots of people there who talk about systems and processes. And just before I was listening to the radio, and they were talking about their, I think Labour had put forward about us all working a 4-day week, which didn't mean that actually businesses aren't covered 5 days a week. And there was a woman who runs a business where people do work a 4-day week, and she said actually their productivity has gone up rather than down, and they're much happier and less stressed, etc. So that's, is working from the outside in. We're looking from the inside out. And first of all is about the difference between pressure and stress. And I get a lot of people kind of say to me, but Melanie, stress is good for you, it kind of, you get energized, etc. And actually what they're not talking about stress, they're talking about a certain level of pressure that is good for you. And there's that kind of often that sort of philosophy of if you can't stand the heat, get out the kitchen. And you should just be able to cope with this level of stress. And what I'm seeing more and more in organizations is that people are surviving, but they're not thriving on the pressures of life and the stresses they're feeling. So let me introduce this model about the zone of optimal performance. So I use this model a lot in organizations. And as you'll see with the, the left-hand column, which is left on my page, is that with increasing demands and pressures, is that when there's low demands and pressures on us, actually we can feel very understimulated or bored or demotivated. And I've always liked to be busy at work, right from my first job as a Saturday girl working in a chemist. I'd much rather be busy all day than have no customers and just be bored. But also we can be understimulated when maybe we're very busy, but we have been doing the same old job for a long time, and we could do it in our sleep. And I had a coaching client earlier on this year who said, I have a very successful business I run, just as himself running it, online business, but he said, I'm bored, I need a new adventure in my working life. And so when we have increased demands and pressures, is we get to this zone of optimal performance. And this is where we have the right level of demands and pressure, where we feel energized and motivated, we're challenged, we're stretched, but we're not strained, and we're excited. We look forward to going to work and, and ending the days feeling still got energy for life outside of work, at the end of the week as well, rather than ending it feeling drained. And this is where, and I'm going to talk more in a bit about our brain, but this is where we work at our most optimal kind of self, and the brain is working well, and I'll tell you why. And so in terms of productivity, this is where you want to be. Now, you might kind of feel you are here now. It may be that you think, well, actually, I'm near the top of that zone. So if you're at the top of the zone of optimal performance, it doesn't take much to tip you over to feeling overwhelmed. So maybe it's just a few bad nights sleep, or suddenly you've got a cold. Or maybe on your commute to work is they're going to be doing roadworks for the next 18 months. They love doing that in Oxfordshire. And suddenly that's going to put a lot of pressure on you. Or there's suddenly a major change at work, and you tip over. And once we're into this stressed and overwhelmed state, we are not in a good place to make decisions and to work effectively, and therefore be productive. And I was rolling out earlier on this year for a pharmaceutical research company a resilience program on about work-life balance, and lots of people were going, they're either in the stressed, overwhelmed zone, or they're in the understimulated zone. And they're feeling bored and demotivated. And that's because either they're stuck into a project, and then the project ends and there's a little bit of, leeway between projects, but they never seem to be in the zone of optimal performance. And it was a 2-part program, so it was interesting, by the time they came back, how many people were getting into that zone of optimal performance by making small changes. So are there any questions that anybody's got about this? Feel free to type in the chat box. If not, or if you kind of think of a question later on, feel free to email me or come back later. So it doesn't seem anyone's got any questions at the moment. So let's get you reflecting on yourself. Are you in the zone right now? I'm kind of guessing that if you've decided to be on this webinar, that perhaps you're not in the zone. But maybe think about, when have you been in the zone in the past? What were the circumstances that enabled you to be in the zone? And maybe there were certain things outside of work as well as inside of work. Maybe you were exercising regularly. Maybe there was you had the energy to do things in the evenings or at the weekends, and that created a balance, and therefore you had more energy at work. And then think about, when you have been in the zone, what does that feel like? How do you behave? What's the impact on productivity? And I know that certainly when I'm in the zone, I'm very organized, I'm very focused, I don't get distracted, and it's kind of boom, boom, boom in terms of my work. Decisions are much easier to make. And when I come on to the about the brain's threat response, we'll find out why it becomes a lot harder when we're not in that zone of optimal performance. So it's good to connect when you have been in that zone. And maybe it was for a period of time, or just moments of time. I certainly, when I was younger, and before I'd learned all of this stuff that I now coach and train people in, I wasn't often in that zone of optimal performance, I have to say. So it's only now that I not now, in the last kind of 10 years, I've kind of really experienced that zone, and know when I start to kind of slip out of it, and how do I get myself back in it. So let's move on to, it's what happens when you're into that kind of red zone, when there's too many demands and too many pressures. Oh yes, that was one thing I was going to say. Let me just go back to the model, is that we're going to look at what you can do to manage yourself. You might also need to look at what, if you've got too many demands, is how do you reduce those demands? And so coaching clients recently is that about looking at reducing those demands. I had one client who's got a project outside of work, who she really wants to get on with it. She put it on the back burner, but it was still kind of nagging away in her head, and the inner critic was still criticizing her for never getting around to doing it. And I said, how about not just on the back burner, but take it off the stove altogether, until January next year, when there's going to be major changes in your life, and you're be able to do it then. So look at decreasing those demands. And sometimes when we have many more demands inside of work, we need to perhaps cut down a little bit outside, and vice versa as well, you know, if it's possible. I was coaching someone yesterday who running his own business, quite a large business, and was feeling very overwhelmed. And when I said, well, who have you got below you who you can delegate to? And he said, well, they're not really operating and, you know, optimally, and I don't have time to have one-to-ones with them. And so you're in a real vicious circle. And so do look at reducing the demands as well as the things that I'm going to look at. So let's look at your brain, about staying in the zone or getting into the zone of optimal performance, managing your brain. So the brain is designed to keep us safe. And so it's constantly looking out for good things, rewards that it wants to go towards, and it's looking out for the threats and risks that it wants to run away from. And I'm going to talk about both of these today. So if you've come to previous webinars, I've talked quite a lot about the threat response, which I am going to in a moment, but I'm also going to talk more about the reward response here. So let's look at the threat response and why it's important in terms of our productivity. So when we go into threat response, so that could be either in terms of we're feeling overwhelmed and we're into threat response. It might be that we're dealing with lots of conflict, maybe in or outside of work. It may be that you've got really looming deadlines and you're feeling very stressed about things. The threat response was designed for fight, flight, or freeze. It wasn't designed for actually stepping back and thinking clearly about things. So lots of different things happen. So our dopamine levels go down, so we feel more pessimistic. So it's hard to kind of see a way out of things. Is that cortisol levels increase. And what happens there is that there's a part of our brain called the hippocampus that has loads of receptors. So it sucks up. So when you're on a webinar like this, or you're learning, or through your day, it's sucking up information and storing that information. And we also then obviously retrieve it from the hippocampus. So the problem is that when cortisol is released, is that it sucks up cortisol and it stops the hippocampus from working well. So it means it's very difficult to retain information, but also to retrieve it as well, which isn't good for working effectively and being productive. We also go into tunnel vision because it was designed for either run like mad, you know, this is when saber-tooth tiger time, but it's the same brain. It was designed for run like mad or stay and fight. But if you're sat in the office and you've got a pile of work and thousands of emails or whatever else, and you've got looming deadlines, when we go into tunnel vision, is that it's great for fight or flight, but it's not for, oh, let me step back. And that's what I find when I coach clients. It gives them that period of time to actually step back and start to see things differently, rather than that kind of rabbit in the headlights sort of thing. So there's lots of different things. Is that we have less insight. It's very hard to make decisions. So all of these things affect our ability to cope. So you might be kind of thinking, wow, that's me now, and kind of head in hands, and what do I do about it? So I'm going to share some tools and tips about how to dampen down the threat response in a moment. Then I'm going to share some kind of longer term things to look at to reduce cortisol in your system and help you. But before I do that, is I constantly go around when I run courses and I coach people with this little room, old-fashioned room thermometer. So I talk about people's emotional temperature. And if your emotional temperature is always up here, if something happens, you go right off the scale. So it's about doing things that reduces your emotional temperature, so that when problems occur, you might have a little blip, but the things that I'm going to talk about next will have a much greater impact. So what you might need to do is use some of these techniques to gradually bring down that emotional temperature. So let's look at some of these. They appear very simple, but there are people who have been on, there was somebody who was on I have an 8-week online course called Being and Doing, and it first ran in January. And I had somebody there who was head of operations and manufacturing, very challenging things outside of work, very challenging work situation. And you know, they said that just what they decided to do is, as they went through the day, is to just maybe on an hourly basis is take a deep breath, step back mentally, kind of look up. I haven't got time to go into why that's important, but I can send you information. And that just helped to calm down and bring down the emotional temperature. Also about coming into the here and now is that there was a neuroscientist who did some research who showed that 80% of the time we're in the stories in our head rather than the here and now. That's fine if they're happy stories, but not so good if they're worries about the past or worries about the future. And so coming into the here and now is really important. And when I'm coaching people who are very overwhelmed, it's not about, oh, start meditating. In fact, the leader I was still coaching yesterday kind of said, he said, I was thinking I'll start yoga, but I never get to the classes. And it's like, well, no, it actually, you know, mindfully brush your teeth, mindfully drive to work, rather than being in your head. And so you can, you know, do it in very practical ways without adding to your workload that's already very big. So those are some things to do in the moment, but let's look at reducing cortisol, the stress hormone. The first thing is about sleep. And, you know, back in the 1980s, there was kind of this, you know, sleep is for wimps attitude. And actually all the research now, we now know that it's important for your physical health. And this is getting a good chunk of sleep. It varies from individuals to individuals, but on average, 7 to 8 hours of sleep, good quality sleep. It's good for your physical health, your mental cognitive health, and your emotional health as well. Great book that I can recommend by Dr. Guy Meadows, The Sleep Book, really useful. And so have a look at that. It's like a week by week course to help you to sleep better by looking actually what you do during the day. Links in very much to what I was talking about, the threat response. Exercise is really important in terms of releasing the tension, is, you know, dopamine, serotonin, etc., and it also reduces cortisol. I've got there about work rest, and this is about actually resting your brain during the day. Is when I was talking about rolling out this program, this resilience program, it was 2-part, and a lot of the people were saying, actually, I never stopped during the day. And quite a lot of them worked in labs. They can't take their lunch into labs. So actually, we're just working through the day. There was no break. There was nothing to, you know. And actually, again, all the research shows is that your productivity and your brain's productivity and its ability to make decisions goes down and down as it loses energy. It needs feeding. It needs some brain space away from your computer and to rest. So having a short sort of break. And somebody's saying about the Pomodoro technique, which focuses on 25 minutes rest. No, sorry, work for 25 minutes and then rest for 5 minutes. And if you're kind of going, oh no, that's too, you know, I think it's finding, you know, it might be about work for 45 minutes and then 5 minutes, whatever it is. But actually the research shows that it's good for your brain. Manage your brain and your mind, bring down your emotional temperature, and look at what are the things that help keep you in the zone of optimal performance. What is it that keeps you? And doing more of that. Or making sure, and so many people that I coach or on my courses say, I used to exercise regularly. I used to see my friends. I used to do this. And then work's got busy, long commutes, you know, family life, etc. But you know, you're not benefiting from it, and your family won't be as well if you're not in a good place, you're not sleeping well, etc. So those are the things in terms of reducing the dampening down the threat response and the cortisol. If you've got any questions, do come up with the do use the chat box. If we now move on to is about the reward response and triggering that reward response. So the reward response is the exact opposite, that you kind of don't kind of have a bit of threat response and at the same time as reward response, is at the moment we trigger that reward response is different chemical reactions are happening. And one of the things is dopamine levels that go up, is that we become more optimistic, is it changes the brain chemicals in our, the chemicals in our brains, cortisol levels go down. And it means that we have that kind of clarity of thought. It's often why if you do go for a walk during the middle of your working day, when you come back, suddenly you see things differently. Is that it's not just been the fresh air and the walk, but actually it's changed something inside your brain as well. So there's all different things you can do, but these are the things I thought I'd focus on. One is to have things to look forward to. That might be, first of all, outside of work. So I've got quite an exciting weekend coming up. And what happens is that every time that you think about something that you look forward to, your dopamine levels go up. So even just looking forward to it, never mind actually doing it, is good for you. So having things to look forward to, but also during the working day. So earlier on this year, I was incredibly busy. I had the busiest, I'm having the busiest year I've had in 28 years of business. And when I was doing these resilience program, they were half-day workshops and I ran them back to back. I'm not doing back to back again. But one of my coping mechanisms was, one is I brought really nice things to eat, because that was quite important for me, things that I cooked the night before to eat. But I got into listening to, I used BBC Sounds and listening to recordings, and they had little 15-minute dramas. And I'd sit in the training room and just have some quiet time by myself, listen to the drama, eat my dinner. And then there was a little kind of wildlife, not quite wildlife, but it was a pond and greenery and things like that nearby. And I'd just go and have a little walk. So in terms of the looking forward to, it was actually, I'm going to have a nice lunch break, rather than that, I've got back-to-back workshops or anything, getting into that kind of sense. Also, one of the things in terms of triggering our dopamine levels and our reward response is a sense of achievement. And if you think about it, is that life often just can appear like one kind of thing after another. And and there's no sense of achievement. So one is about being able to break tasks down, particularly if they're big tasks. So if you've got a report to do, is, have it listed out, okay, the introduction, part 1, part 2, conclusions, or whatever else it is, and tick it off. And every time we tick something off our to-do list, we get a little dopamine hit. And so it's, how do you get those little dopamine hits that help, naturally help you to go through the day? Creating a winning streak. So if you want to exercise more, or, do yoga or whatever else it might be, or eat healthily, is that creating winning streak, so that your inner critic doesn't go, you think, well, I've exercised 3 times a week this week, and your inner critic goes, yes, but you should have done it 5 times. So create that winning streak. So somebody's come forward with something. I complete a to-do list. However, I find I fill it with far too many things, and find one item to do on the list actually consists of lots of things that need to be done. So having to work on being realistic with your to-do list. And I completely agree. I'm coaching somebody at the moment who runs their small business. And we've worked on, actually, there might be a long list that is the things that need to do, but on your daily list is you transfer over to what's actually going to be realistic. So you might have a list for your month, and then your week, and then your day, so that you are realistic about it. And I think that's where sometimes looking at, actually, some of these things, do they need to go on a back burner? So if you have a back burner list, rather than them sort of constantly hanging over and never getting that kind of sense of achievement. So also about being in flow, so being in flow and really being in the here and now. And so when we're in flow, we're not stressing about things, we are just responding to the moment. And I would say about this, obviously often people talk about being flow at work and when you're doing something, but also you can think about things outside of work as well. And I was once having a walk. I live near Woodstock and Blenheim Palace, and I was having a walk around Blenheim Palace, the Gart Park, with a friend, and I said, oh, isn't it beautiful here? And she went, oh, I'm just thinking about all the work I've got to do back at home. And she, you know, she's self-employed, family life, etc. Rather than being here and now and just being here, because actually just worrying about work isn't going to help you. Also, sleep again, really important in terms of the dopamine levels. Green exercise is very important. I'm just keeping an eye on the time here. And so what's green exercise is going outside. And I read some research, actually it was from a conference I went to, where even 5 minutes of being outside and walking starts to positively impact on your sense of well-being. So somebody says, how can you avoid distractions from doing your to-do list, such as reaching to or reacting, I'm guessing that means, to emails? Those people who are most productive will often say, I have a time for doing my emails. It's 9 o'clock, 2 o'clock, and whatever. And that's when I do my emails. And other than that, my emails are switched off. And they're very strict with their emails. They might even have an outer office reply. This might fill you with horror that says, I look at my emails between these times and that's when I will get back to you. And so, you know, managing your emails, I could do a whole webinar on that. So maybe that is, but we haven't got quite time yet. So we're running out of time. So let me just summarize is think about getting into what activities help you to get into that zone of optimal performance. How do you reduce? So using some of those tools and techniques, and I'll send you the recording of this once it's edited, so it'll be sometime next week. Reduce the threat response and cortisol levels, how you increase the reward response and dopamine levels. And think about taking action, even if it's really tiny action, hour by hour, day by day, so that you are reducing your emotional temperature. You're in a good place to be as productive as possible. And if you want support and help on that, there's a whole range of different things that I offer. One is I've got another Being and Doing course. It's an 8-week course that starts, I think it's 28th of October. There's more information on the website and I'll send you. Every week there's a different theme. There's videos, there's workbooks, there's lots of information that I can send you. And there's 2 price points this time, one just for the material and the other for material and coaching as well. I have free coaching audits. But also, if you haven't already registered with my website, inspiretransformation.co.uk, then do that. And then you'll get Melanie's Monday motivational messages to keep you inspired, my monthly coaching newsletter, and also information about free webinars and free talks that I do as well. So do sign up at the webinar. I'm sorry, at the website. So if there's any final kind of comments or questions, please feel free. It's now, I think it's noon. We've got about a minute to go. So if you have got any questions, then do type away. But if not, as I said, I'll send this out to you probably be the end of next week, start of the following week. And once it's edited, and then you can have it to watch as much as possible. So it doesn't seem like anybody's got any questions. So great. Somebody is going, so they said thank you. They're going for a 10-minute walk to energize themselves this afternoon. And my voice is just cracking up just at the right time. So go out, here where I am, it's a beautiful afternoon. So make the most of it. Even if it's for 10 minutes, you're just going to feel good. So other people off to go and get their green exercise. I like it. It's great. So have a wonderful afternoon and a wonderful weekend as well. So lots of people going to go for walks. That's wonderful to hear. And take care. Bye.